Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashrothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show's continued coverage of the CSM 16 with our interviews, this time with Hurleyalex. Hurley, how you doing, Hurley?
I'm all right. How are you guys?
I am doing very well. I'm very excited to be doing these CSM interviews, talking to you all, exploring your campaigns with each other, or with each of you. So let's go ahead and jump right into it by explaining the rules. Same as always. I get 50 minutes to explore the candidacy with the candidate. I have their post in front of me, and we'll be showing it to you. We will go over their positions and their thoughts and whatever I feel like talking about in order to better understand and maybe figure out why the candidate is running and why you might want to vote for him. And then after I am done, I give him a 10-minute warning, and he is given the opportunity to cover maybe anything that they may feel that I lacked, or something that they want to hit on more, or however they want to close that out. And then when we're satisfied, it goes over to YouTube, where it goes on the playlist with all of the others, so that way you can watch them all and become informed, because that is the most important thing. An informed electorate. Having an informed electorate means an effective CSM. An effective CSM means a powerful tool for players with the developers. With all that being said, thank you so much, Hurley, for coming here. What is your history with the CSM? Is this your first time running?
Yeah, this is my first time running. I've seen multiple other CSM members, obviously, in my alliance of run in the past. So I thought it may be about time that I give it a crack.
Right. Okay. And this is an important thing, because like a lot of the null blocks, like some of them, the at least the belief would be that they have their what?
Oh, sorry. I was
Oh no, null blocks.
fixing my mic.
Oh, okay, my bad. Null blocks have their block votes, and people vote their block and all that kind of stuff. And I always say, when it comes to that kind of thing, like, that isn't why you're here, right? You've got whatever votes, whatever agreements you have with your organization, with the institution that you belong to. That's between you and your master, leader, whatever.
Leadership.
But you're here.
Yeah.
You're here to talk to everybody else, right? Because that's otherwise, well, like that's who my audience is. So, help me understand, like, what. First of all, when did you first get into EVE Online?
Talking back in like 2013 now, I think. That was when I first played. It was 2013, 7th to 28th.
Okay.
And I started with a small group of friends, kind of like, as I see that most people end up starting each with a few friends these days, kind of like, we got our own corp and we chilled around in high set, mined, ratted, kind of like got into a war with some militants, lost the war, as you do when you're brand new, and we tried to do what we did, and it was then after then my friends decided to stop playing for a bit, so I took a break for a year, joined a low set group, did them for about a year, and then I took a big break free for about 5 years. When I came back and decided to investigate high sec incursions, so I did that. I became a Logi commander for Warp to Me, which I got my eyes in how Logi works, and I carried on there and I became an FC for them. It's my first taste of FCing, or like leading somewhat of a group, which I enjoyed. I was invited by a friend I made there to come join in nullsec, which is where I am now.
So did you ever engage with invasions?
I did only very shortly, kind of like a few group of my people in my current corp did it when it came around, but I never really touched much into them.
So you did incursions, but I guess that wasn't your bag ultimately, or
I enjoyed it, but I thought it would be better to, instead of just, because at the time when I was doing it, that was all I was doing, kind of like, so I thought I'd see what else the game had to offer, because I'd never really PvP'd. It was mainly PvE I had engaged with, and I was awful at PvP, so I thought I'd jumped down to nullsec with some friends down there, and I engaged in PvP and started to broaden my knowledge on mechanics of the game.
So do you feel like you finally found your home, I guess, after these different things that you tried?
Yeah, I definitely enjoy myself more down in nullsec now because over last year or so I've worked my way up the FC team, and I'm kind of like what you call a skirmish, which is mid tier. You have like your basic, and your mid, and then your tops, like your Pro God, your Villy, and your Carmen, kind of like. So obviously I won't claim, I never claim to know everything. I know I'm always quite new to stuff, but I just like to learn stuff as I do, and I really enjoy FCing as I did when I was in incursion. So I actually enjoy PvP FCing a lot more than I did doing PvE incursions. I'll be honest.
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of the point, or at least I hope that that's at least somewhat the point of those kinds of content, where it gives people a safe space to learn these kinds of skills, and then eventually, once you get your bearings on it, you get bored of that and go and do it for real, and that's like the goal, right? Like you're a classic example of why a system like incursions can be useful to Eve ecosystem in training new FCs, which is one of the reasons why I'm sad that you didn't like then go back and do the invasion stuff, because there's a lot of things that I saw as improvements to that it would have been nice uh, for you to have been able to see. But
Yeah, I mean, when the invasions was down, I was just starting, or I was in the middle of starting off all my PvE FCing, kind of like down in Esoteria, where I was fighting like the stain groups. So I was quite involved with all of that. I ran like a mini campaign over there for like half a year while not much was going on. So I was mainly involved down there. So I wasn't paying much attention, unfortunately, to all the invasions. Kind of like,
right, well, yeah, and I mean, it's unfortunate, but it is true that there's a lot of iteration on that, and there has been stuff with more recent, like with events and such. So it'd be always interesting to get your take on that. But let's jump back to kind of what you represent, though, because you name dropped, you said Villy and ProGod, and these are two other guys that are both running for the CSM and have a lot of clout both in the CSM and in your organization. I guess I'm just going to ask you: are you looking to get voted instead of them or alongside them? Like, what is your expectation here?
I mean, I'm more running as an underdog, so I don't expect to end up beating Villy or Progod. I mean, the chances are that I think, from my view, they're highly likely to get in. Like you're looking like your Briscubal
Would
with
you
the
want
major
to if
groups
you
behind
could?
him. I mean, I would more than happily be beside them or take a place if I got that much votes. It all depends on what the community thinks in a general. Like I always say, I say you vote for who thinks lines to you best, not on what someone tells you to vote.
Right. But so if you're not looking, the reason why I ask it this way is because we can assume that a CSM 16 with Hurleyalex Hurley also has a Billy and a Pro God. Would you say that that's a pretty safe assumption for discussion
Most
about the
likely,
future?
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I wouldn't say I wouldn't mind to take one of their places, but the likelihood is if I get elected, they will both be elected as well.
You wouldn't get in trouble. Like, have you ever watched
Oh
like
no,
Legacy of Kain? Like, they just like pull you in front of them and be like, I've surpassed my master, and they rip off your clothes and throw you into the pit and banished for
no,
daring to
no.
rise up
I'm
higher than your master. No, they're not like that. Okay, good.
No, I'm just not big enough at the moment, especially inside of tests, to probably get myself on these ballots.
That's
Kind
fair.
of like to get my name on there. The likelihood is there'll probably be some Horde allies or whatever before I even get on there, so I might be lower down. Like you're talking like you're sixth or seventh, something like that.
That's fair. So,
Likely behind people like Ron USMC, who's got quite a big standing at the moment.
well, let's assume that like you get elected, so that means that it's the three of you, or at least it's the two of them, and now we're deciding whether or not we want to elect you, right? So, what do you bring to the table that they don't already bring? Why aren't you just redundant at that point?
I like to say I focus a lot more on trying to support current groups because, like I say, we've got with your new players and your groups that you've got in at the moment, like you've got like groups that help people with their mental health and stuff. I'd like to see more support to those types of groups because, as we know in the past, especially with some certain FCs as well, it's been a quite um, obvious where they've admitted that they've suffered with mental health and they've had to take away from the game. Where I'd like to see some support, especially with you've got like a group that helps with that. I can't remember exactly the name off the top of my head.
Broadcast for reps?
Yes, that's it. That helps with stuff like that. I'd like to see maybe some more support towards them, along with like I know with Corp Wises and other groups like that. I mean, like I don't want any particular group, whether it be Goon Swarm, Horde, or whatever, to be gone from the game. I don't believe that any membership is particularly toxic. However, I believe that some people lead them in wrong directions. So I don't like say where some of them, like say Pro God or Billy, they want to remove people like Goon Swarm completely. Where I'd rather see them stay, but not stay in the game, but perhaps maybe not in the form that they are now. Like I don't want any particular group to disappear. I always like to see support for groups to stay in and as a whole.
What do you but help bring that home for me. What does that have what can you do as a CSM member to because I mean I think that CCP knows that Broadcast for Reps is a very important organization. They give a lot of support through Streamfleet and through other stuff to give and work with us. And I don't know. I mean, they have worked with the CSM before because I think that these are uh, not difficult to find representation for those specific concerns. So like. Let me ask you this. What? Sorry, go on.
No, go on, sorry.
Uh, you talk about how you want to fix the economy, so it's no longer a slog to make your ISK. Can you?
Yeah, so I've that's one thing I believe is hurting the game currently because I know as well, especially some newer members struggle to make any significant amount of money. Um, and that's one thing I disagree with. Especially, I've got members in my corp that have been playing Eve for what 4 years, and they've gone don't have any way to gain any ISK enough to sometimes buy stuff like your T2 cruisers, which aren't relatively expensive, because the ways they used to make ISK have been nerfed to oblivion practically. I mean, if you look at mining in most cases, where a lot of people could make a couple of billion in a month, now some people can only make maybe 100, so they can't even afford to plex their accounts anymore, which I understand. Obviously, there's still a lot of ore in circulation that hasn't yet been removed, but it feels more they're punishing certain types of players than perhaps maybe the people who have massive stockpiles.
Well, one of the things is that CCP has kind of made it clear that they're working on uh, emphasizing active roles over inactive roles, and mining does have its place as a uh, as kind of semi AFK activity, and I think that it should be preserved in that sense. But because of that, it actually should be a lower reward than maybe some other activities. And I think that in the old days of Eve Online, we had the idea of risk versus reward, but um, what CCP has kind of been drifting towards is a triad of risk, reward, and activity, right? Like the risk of nullsec can be undermined by botnet network, or by Intel networks and tweaked outfits and all this sort of stuff. but it's really the fact that people aren't engaging. They're AFKing the game. Wouldn't you rather a game with activity that's like engaging and then have that engagement rewarded rather than fight on behalf of AFK gameplay?
I mean, I do. However, I believe they've gone around it slightly the wrong way, where instead they've nerfed things to oblivion of perhaps maybe instead of making things more active. Like, might sound stupid to some people, but if we go and talk to like stuff like the raw quartz and mining barges, instead of making it just an F1 click and forget about it for so long, make it a bit more different. So, like, instead of drones, turn it into kind of like a fighter way, where you have to look after them and they can only cycle for so long before they need to do something else. So,
Right.
give them a limited amount of cycles to re-engage it on, instead of, let's say, removing almost majority of the ore from belts and stuff like that. It's like the removal of belts in most space has hurt people who used to go belt retting, which isn't a AFK thing, right? Because the spawns have basically been reduced to, if some belts, if there are any, and gates, kind of like celestial objects,
Mm-hmm.
where if they were doing it actively, they were pinging around, pinging, and then moving system.
Right.
Where now it is like, okay, I've got 4 places in this system, so now I have to travel like 7 different regions to get the same as I did in one region, kind of like.
Right. Yeah. And it is no secret that the officer spawn debacle was an unintended outcome of other decisions that were made. It was a collateral damage that no one noticed for a
Until
long
too late.
time. Well, yeah, because
Yeah.
so the thing was is that they removed all the ore from the belts, but they didn't actually tell us. I mean, they gave us a dev blog, but they didn't say these belts now have no ore. So for a year, there were these belts that just had no ore, and everybody just assumed that they were just mined out or whatever. But it was just like literally, there's no ore at all assigned to those belts. It can never have ore ever, and it was that way for a year. And then finally, CCP was like, "Okay, we're going to clean it up because the fact that these belts exist is kind of confusing to people." But between that time, left side not knowing what the right side is doing, they didn't realize that like removing the belts also means removing belt rats. Belt rats being essential for the creation of officer spawns. Certain regions had no belts now. Certain officers could no longer be spawned. Whoopsie daisy. So then CCP kind of creates a stopgap solution in these gates, allowing belt rats to now spawn on gates. This causes further issue where now people are running into giant gate camps of rats and getting angry at them. Uh, Obviously, we need to head towards a better solution for that.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's like with our most recent update with notification changes. It's not that the update itself is bad, it's more the implementation and how they communicate across, which is one thing I believe CSM should have a opinion in or a speak in, which is to help them bridge what CCP wants to do to what the community understands and how everything comes together, kind of like. Because, like, I mean, you can no doubt that probably some of or majority of the CSM might have said no to the reduction of ore and whatnot because they didn't want those changes. But then I think that was practically it. There wasn't a right, okay, you want to do this, let's help you implement it in a slightly better way for the community as a whole. I believe although the CSM is a wonderful tool, you're not a tool to demand things from CCP.
Right.
You're a tool to help CCP as a whole. So if they decide they want to go down this train, you go, right, okay, but you have to be aware it's going to affect this, and this,
Right.
which will have a negative effect upon something else. And to make sure that CCP, because although they are developers, not all developers perhaps maybe know every ins and out of the game, kind of like.
There's
And
a lot.
don't get me wrong, I don't claim to know every ins and out of the game, but I know certain ins and outs, kind of like I know about incursions, ratting, mining, and some of PvP. So I don't claim to be a know-it-all about PvP, but I'd like to say I know a fair amount about the others, which I'd like to say I'd be able to have a say on, because as well, like you don't want them to next and go, right, okay, we want to change missions entirely. Right, okay, but how do you want to change them? You know what I mean?
Right.
That could be the very well next way they go. Right, missions are all good, but we don't like the way they're done. Perhaps there maybe like some people can run them in like battleships, assign drones, and then leave them and come back in 10 minutes, right? Where CCP might go, we don't want that anymore. Right, so how do we make that? You don't want that anymore. Perhaps you need certain rats in there that do more different things, some
Right.
that have higher dangerousy levels than others, so you can't just go into a site, assign your drones, and then forget about it. Where, let's say, people in nullsec, they use Ishtars and stuff, but you can primarily just go into sites, pull out your drones, and just ignore them, right? Where perhaps maybe you go, right, okay, these we change this rat to specifically target drones, so someone can't just go AFK. So you have to be there almost every single wave to make sure you're not losing all of your drones, and you have to target them first. Where this one might you can't speed tank it because this one uses webs and is going to come in and slow you down. Right, okay. So you have to, although CCP might go, I want to change how ratting's done, you have to go and go, right, okay. So these are ideas how you can change it for the way you want, but it's not going to hurt everybody else. So like you say, we want to remove orphan belts, okay, and remove the belts, right, okay, but you need to supplement the people who do ratting belts or those rats elsewhere. Perhaps not in gates, because then people who just travel, or you come into nullsec for the very first time and you get absolutely sorted by gate rats. It's not a fun time, especially if you've come in to try and adventure and see what nullsec's like, right? That's not what you want, because that then pushes people away from those areas of the game. Where if someone shows an interest, you want them to be able to come in and see what it's like. Like if you take stuff like the event for the Grand Tour. The Grand Tour is a great idea to go around to Monuments of Eve and see like like the first Titan that was ever killed and whatnot. But if you notice from the people who went to the first monument to the last dropped dramatically. Why was that? That's because people started camping the gates, so they need a different way to get in that isn't going to kill them immediately. At which point you had kind of like your scepters and stuff, so you could minimize the risk of those gate camps and not get smart bombed instantly if you were smart about it.
Right.
Which implies that. But now we've just gone to shuttles where if you set it just right, you can kill a shuttle when it comes in,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of how it is. It hurts certain dynamics of the games. Like I approve the changes of nullification as a general, but I don't agree with how they've implemented it or how they've communicated with their community as a whole, because they've removed some things out of existence completely. Yeah, Higgins, that's
Right.
why you don't go into nullsec anymore.
So,
That's what I want to change.
okay, there's a lot you went over a lot of different points. So my concern is that we're talking about how to build, better PvE, right? Um, and the solutions are thing that I'm hearing are not necessarily making the engagement more fun, but it's just basically asking them to have to pay attention rather than letting it be more engaging. And what concerns
Well,
me is that the Abyss and invasions and events, these things they've done a lot of work in the last 3 years to build a better AI that behaves better, that does proper e-war, that behaves like a fleet, that responds to e-war correctly. And so, like, I asked you if you had engaged with this stuff. You have not. You want to speak on this subject about how to improve the PVE. Um, are you are you an authority on that subject?
Like I say, I don't claim to be a know-it-all. I know it all in some areas, but not all. Like I say, I get a lot of my information as well from others who run it. Like I might not run Abysses very often anymore, but I have people I talk to regularly who do.
But
So
my
where, go on,
my
sorry.
point is, why can we accept that things like mining and ratting are valid gameplay? We don't actually need to make those more engaging or more whatever, but they can be the low level, better than level 4 missions with the same level of equipment or whatever, because you're in nullsec. So it is a little bit, you get better for the rewards, but you're not going to be getting the same as even a dude doing level 5s in high sec, level 5 abyss runs, or an invasion runner doing their stuff. They're going to be able to make at least as much as you, because the fact that they are active, the fact that they are coordinating, the fact that they're using expensive equipment, doing hard stuff, that means that they have to be on top of things and constantly adapting to the unfolding story. They make as much, or they make way more than the miners and the ratters. So yeah, you can AFK it, but that's the low end of the ISK. Isn't that acceptable?
It's somewhat. I mean, when you say low end, most people, right? Okay, you might make 20 million per tick. However, I know a lot of people that run 8 accounts doing it, right? I don't believe that you should necessarily be able to run 8 different accounts doing it all at once, because they can just go in and assign drones and forget about it. Now, don't get me wrong, some areas of the games aren't going to be as fun as others. Like I know the Abyss is I know a lot of people that enjoy the Abyss because of the way it is, but it's still as dangerous, in my opinion, as going down somewhere else in nullsec and doing ratting, because as I've been told multiple times by people, you go into the Abyss and sometimes it can be a 50-50 whether you die or not because of the type of spawn you get, which
Right.
is one of those which, again, necessarily I don't think you should have it that way, where it's a 50-50 chance of whether you go in to this and you die because you got 7 Leshraks that all nuke you to death. It
So
should be a bit more varied and a little bit tiny more forgiving, especially in those circumstances.
I would argue that the so there are definitely builds that can clear tier 5 without a single death room, as we call it. So proper piloting, there are builds, Gila's, and a lot of several hacks that basically have been proven to not have death rooms. T6, I'm a little bit less caught up on it. They did buff. They buffed the Abyss, gave it some harder sights, and at the same time, Surgical Strike really hurt Abyss runners. So it may not be quite as much as before, but I definitely wouldn't give it uh, that characterization. And that's one of my concerns here, is that, like, uh, I'm a so we've been saying that we need Eve to be more engaging. We want PVE, there to be a better PVE and all this stuff. And CCP has been working pretty hard on this for, like I said, 3 years. Lots of enhancements and improvements and all that stuff. And yet, I see, especially the null blocks, being incredibly resistant to to embrace it and to want this more active gameplay, and instead are trying to preserve kind of the older way. And like, I don't I'd like to can you help me understand how you can represent the modern Eve?
Um, I don't necessarily think that you should just be able to AFK away, which is what a lot of people in the nullsec area. I believe what I believe is you should be active enough that you can't just leave your computer for like a couple of minutes, because otherwise it's not engaging, like you say, which is why I'm saying if we change the way the rats function in these certain sites, almost similar to kind of like the Abyss, because when you go into the Abyss, you can't just enter and forget about it. Kind of like you have multiple different things that
Right.
will fuck you up if you just kind of like walk away and go away. Where if I talk about the people I know if you talk about the nullsec site specifically, the go to work, put it up on a monitor or whatever, and then carry on doing their work while they rat all day because they don't have to pay any attention to it. Kind of like, I
Right.
don't believe you should be able to do that. I believe that if you do it, you need to be able to kind of like sit there, and you have to pay attention to it. All right, you might be able to put something on another monitor, maybe watch a film while you do it and flick back to both of them, but you can't just forget about it,
Right.
because if you just forget about it, all it does is it becomes a chore. Kind of like, all right, today I need to go out and put the ship out to go and do these sites because I need to make some money, and I'll go and do this other thing while I do it.
Right.
Like, I'll
But
admit I had a bad habit of that, especially before the mining changes. I used to run like kind of like 4 Rorquals and go play a different game
right.
because I didn't have to worry about it. Kind of like I had a panic button that would immediately save me for 5 minutes. Like I'm happy they changed the panic. If you go back, what was it, a year or two ago, where they changed how the panic works. It wasn't an automatic kind of like 10 minutes you're safe until your alliance or group or whatever could organize a fleet to come over to save you. Now it's like half the time it was, and it becomes a lot more restrictive. Like with the Sino changes, I'm happy they changed the Sino changes, where you can no longer just stick a Sino on any ship and light it, because that's how it worked. Now there's limited ships that can use them, which is great because it adds more volume to the game. You know what I mean? You
Hmm.
can't just no longer sit there because some people used to sit there in the Ishtars with Sinos, and as soon as something comes on, they would light a Sino and jump their Horde Red and a Fax over,
Right.
because you know that's even less engaging, kind of like, you know what I mean? You hear something going on, all right, I click F3, jump, jump, cool, it's safe.
Yep.
It's not something that should stay in that way. It's Although you might call NullSec a necessarily dangerous place to be, it can be relatively safe most of the time if you know how to work around it. There
Right.
are systems in place that allow you to be safe.
Right.
But it's like, now if you talk how people use capitals, you can't anymore just shove a carrier out or a super and just run away when someone comes in system, because if you've got an NSA on, you know what I mean? You can't run away for a good minute or so. You're committed to that grid,
Right.
which is good because it requires you to then pay attention to what's around you and what you're doing. You can't just plink away at the rats and forget about everything else. You have to look at who's around you, what's in system with you, now that you've got those in places. And especially now with supers and carriers, it's a lot more riskier than it was before, because you can't plop a signer on it, which means you don't necessarily always have a instant come and save me kind of like, especially with the EHP changes to capitals. They're now a lot squishier than they were. It's a lot easier to kill if you find one and catch it. There's been often times where I've gone in with a fleet and roamed around and found a carrier or a super and gone cool and killed it, because you come in, you drop a Sino and hip, and then they have to worry about what can I do to keep safe. Where if they were paying a bit more attention, they would have realized people are coming in. I need to look at getting safe. I need to align out. I need to jump out, or however you want to go around it. things should be more active. I'm not saying no to that, but what I'm saying is when things are necessarily as boring as they are, you need to change it so you're not just pinging off and pinging back to another rock. Make it slightly more engaging or slightly more interesting to do. All right, it might require a few more mechanics in or a few more here and there, but if you just remove aspects of it basically away, because that's what they've done at the moment, and that's how I feel they've done. They went, people mind too much because they can just sit there AFK. Let's just remove the quantity of ore that they can do in total. It doesn't fix the issue as a whole.
Well, yeah, and I don't
I
think that they
mean,
suggested it would.
no, but perhaps
Quite the
maybe
opposite.
instead, yeah. So with the bigger belts and stuff which people go to, like the enormous ore anomalies, make bigger, harder rats spawn every now and again. Because I know at the moment you can sit there for a good 30, 40 minutes and sometimes nothing spawns at all. So make them more frequent, make them tankier or stronger, or come in slightly bigger groups so you have to worry about them more.
Should the principal threat
So
in nullsec be PvE or PvP?
overall, I think it should be PvE. Sorry, PvP. Get my words right. That's what I do majority in nullsec,
Right.
and that's what I think it is. It's player-owned space. There should be fights over space and what there is. Like I want to encourage wars going on. I don't believe that there should be, like you say, like a lot of people say, like there's a blue donut. I mean, at the moment, yes, there is. There's a big block versus another big block with relative numbers. But overall, when you're in nullsec, you should be worried about people coming into your space. Like they've done with the changes to the ESS. I quite like the changes to the ESS. You have to pay attention, and if someone comes in to steal your money, you have to respond to it or let it go.
You don't have to,
Kind of like,
but you can just let them
no,
take your stuff. Yeah, and
yeah,
so I think that that is like the Eve ecology. I like to think of them as like the different animal life and all that sort of stuff. And if you think of nullsec as farms and fields, then these these mining ships and these ratters are like the cows and the sheeps in the field, grazing on the grass to give strength to the nation or whatever. So to that end, uh, their principal job is to be out there, fat, slow, and lazy, so that way when the marauders come in, they get caught and butchered because they can't defend themselves and they don't know any better. So to that end, I would think that actually allowing them to be lulled into like senses of safety, such that the marauders can show up and harass them, would be beneficial, and giving them check-ins to force them to pay attention would actually make them less likely to get caught. When you argue that we should just take away their defenses, like things like penalizing warp core stabs, taking away their sinos, leaving them exposed, and that way those guys, those businessmen that you were talking about, who by the way also probably pay a lot of money, uh, they they get to their gameplay too, and they're effectively being paid to leave their ass hanging out for a period of time, so that way other people can come and possibly shoot at him, and he's got his tricks up his sleeve to try to get away. And as long as those tricks are fair, then that's fair gameplay.
yeah, to an extent. I mean, when you're making them more active, not everybody's being like a hook, kind of like. I mean, there's been multiple times where I've gone out and stuff like that when, let's say, once the changes have happened, and I'll admit I've died because necessarily I was paying attention, but I'm not paying attention to the right parts. Kind of like you don't want people to just sit there and forget about stuff, because at what point are they really playing your game? If you look at it that way, kind of like if they can just sit there and forget about the window, are they really playing your game? Or are they just doing something else? And that's a background task. Because at that point, it's kind of like just a background task on your computer. It's not necessarily the game as a whole.
That's
People,
true. Hmm?
should should be paying attention to what they're running. You shouldn't be able to run 8 different accounts, forget about it, and go watch a film.
I
You
mean,
should
I
have
don't
to pay
disagree.
attention to those accounts.
I don't disagree with especially the conclusion of that, especially the 8 accounts portion of it. But I will say that, like, I like to think again about like the core fantasy of different play styles. And when you think about the miner in particular, the foreman, the high scale miner, I think of the guy at the edge of the galaxy, you know, out where it's cold and quiet in his overalls, with his feet kicked up, reading a magazine, not knowing that Sandra's prowling right behind him. I think there's even a trailer with that in it. The redneck dude at the edge of the universe, listening to the drone of the mining lasers. So I think that if anywhere deserves to have a bit of that Netflix and chill gameplay, uh, it should be mining. But at the same
Yeah,
time, there should be also more active gameplay, like Resource Wars. They actually just brought back Wars, which represents more of a mining challenge, which isn't about collecting rocks, but it's about being a better miner, which is kind of cool.
yeah, which I quite like myself as well. But like I think there should be more of a scale. Like one thing they could change is the scale between the high sex and with your mining, with the sex status. The lower the sex status, the more dangerous it should be for you to especially just be out there if you're in rat, you know what I mean, from rats in general. If you
Another
want to just go there and sit there and kind of like just listen to your drones and not worry very much, you've got your high set kind of like where you don't have to deal with much apart from a few gankers that might come along. Where if you go to low sec, it should necessarily be slightly more dangerous. The rats spawn a bit more. I mean, they are necessarily already stronger than high sec, but I think the differences should be increased a bit more. Kind of like if you look at your mission levels, you missions go up from 1 to 3, 4, 5, kind of like where if you go into low sec, the rats and how dangerous they are practically the same as your no sec rats and how dangerous they are.
uh, no offense, but spoken like somebody who has not never encountered a clone soldier or a dread in a nullsec belt. The special
Yeah.
rats do escalate as you go up the difficulty for sure. The normal
Oh
rats do
no.
too. The high sec rats are very trivial. The low sec rats, you probably can't just ignore them and like Avenger or whatever. And then by the time you get to null, you do have to be at least somewhat prepared for the rats that you'll find, right?
Somewhat, but not necessarily at the point I think it should be. Kind of like,
That's true.
all right, you do get those spawns, but how often do they spawn?
So, but
I'll admit, when I used to go out to the belt, I was out for a belt for a good month before I even saw one of those spawns.
right.
And one of those spawns just tickled me, kind of like I had a dread spawn on me, which tickled me, and I even had a Sancha super carrier spawn on me that did nothing. Like they don't have their fighters
That's fair.
in those belts, so why not? If they're going to spawn, why not let them have the fighters? Like I don't even know what. To be perfectly honest, I don't even know what the Sancha super carrier was shooting at me with because it felt like just normal lasers.
Probably nothing.
And I could have sat there all day and not cared about it.
Right.
That's
Okay.
what I mean.
That makes
They
sense. Yeah.
spawn so rare and far between. How often do you encounter?
Yeah. And it,
Because like, I mean, during that month, I was playing for like almost 8 hours a day. You know what I mean? And I had maybe a dread spawn on me,
right.
like in those belts. Those those rat types are a lot more common when you run the sites,
Right.
especially the higher sites. You get dread spawn on you, which especially if you're in a carrier or a super carrier, if you're not paying attention, they fuck all your fighters up, and like when you're doing that, your fighters can be quite expensive. Which,
Right.
yeah, all right, cool, that's good.
So
But again, sorry, go on.
yeah, but so the new rats again are an improvement on this, and like so in high sec you had through Invasions Chapter 2, you have the Rasnaborg, which were like these packs of 5 dudes that would just kind of roam around in certain infected systems. And a bunch of people would be like, these guys killed my Orca because they were AFK or whatever. And now we have the wormholes open up. And so there are Rasnaborg in systems connected to Poshvin, which means still to today, like they go to belts, and I believe that they still can go to gates sometimes, but just very rarely, or maybe not at all. But either way, they've toned them down a little bit. But the point is that these things roam around and engage people in belts. If you are paying attention, you can deal with them and get away. If you're not paying attention, then they're Triglavians. So eventually their weapons will ramp up to the point where they can rip through even an Orca with a couple of frigates. So they've been incredibly effective at kind of giving high-sec players wake-up calls. But at the same time, high-sec has always been a little bit better at dealing with what nullsec likes to call non-consensual PvE than nullsec has been. You know, when we got fobs and diamond rats running around, we kind of rolled with it. When drifters attacked nullsec, they lost their goddamn mind. They don't want non-consensual PvE. Can you speak to those nullsecers, or can you help me understand, like, how can we get nullsec to accept a PvE that demands it be respected when mostly what I hear out of nullsec is that they want PvE to just get out of their way and be basically a button that they push so that way they can get paid out and go to the real game of PvP. What do we say to those people?
Well, if you talk about when they were roaming around in nullsec, I mean, part of the issue was they would appear, they'd ref up a structure, and then never appear again. Like the ideas of the structures is to have timers that fights roll over, kind of like.
Right.
And if there's no response to a timer, well, what's the point? Kind of like they're just then an annoyance, kind of like. If you're just having it come up, hit a structure, and be non-consensual, and then run away, well, what's the point of them coming? Kind of like. If you then go, all right, they spawn in certain systems when certain values happen, and then they will come back with maybe a scout fleet first, and then a kind of like a response where you actually have to get something together to deal with, then all right, cool. In my mind, that's a cool game. You know what I mean? It's forcing you to respond to something, which again follows very similar to kind of like your PvE style as well. PvP, sorry, where people come, they have a go at a structure, and then they have a go at coming back later on.
Right.
And that's when the fight goes on. But if they're just coming, hitting a structure, being an annoyance, and going away,
Well,
what's the point, kind of like?
Well, at that point, we didn't know that that was what it was going to be, and I even argued with them like, oh well, if they're not going to follow up, then you can just ignore it completely, right? And I get told no because they could follow up, or somebody else might take advantage of it, or whatever. But the point of the matter was that wasn't good enough. It was non-consensual PVE, and I've also heard this out of wormholers, because when Triglavians connect to wormhole space, they got upset because Triglavians were going in and disrupting their PVE site running, and they're reinforcing their structures, and they, like, players feel that their agency is being somehow disrupted by the PVE, and they're not seeing it as a universe that is like imposing itself upon them that they must now react and respond to, and they're citing this as a big problem and complaining about it and threatening to quit the game and whatnot. So, like, how do we get there, man?
I mean, at that point, as horrible as it sounds, I can't say let them go. There were a lot of people that just left when some changes come in, and if this is the way CCP wants to take the game, which personally I approve of, like make people more active, make them have to respond to stuff, then sometimes you have to let them go and attract the new audience,
So you're
which
in
is
the
something
HTFU
that,
camp. If you can't get used to the fact that the universe is out there and spooky too, then find another game.
yeah. I mean, take what happened with Niaja, right? That link got gone, and lots of people lost their shit about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the response was, well, why didn't you come do something about it? Because they had the opportunity, but they decided they just want to sit there and ignore it. If you're just going to sit there and ignore it when you have chances to deal with it, then what are you complaining about? You could have come in and stopped it, but you didn't. Where if you go stuff like drifters, if they're just going to spawn randomly, then it's a bit like But if
Right.
they spawn from something that you can do something about, that's different. If let's say the drifters come from a Ferro wormhole, right, and that's where you know they're coming from, you can do something about it. You
Right.
can attempt to close the wormhole. You can cut off their links to stop them if you don't want that.
Right.
However, if you don't mind them, and you know what I mean, perhaps maybe when they come back or whatever, they drop something worthwhile fighting them for, then that's, you know what I mean. It engages them in a different way. You have to. You can't just implement something that's negative without anything that you get from it. Kind of like if you implement the drifters and they just go and attack everyone randomly and they don't follow up, what's the point? But at the time they didn't know that, so people were freaking out going, when we kill them, they don't drop anything at all. So it's just kind of like a annoying harassment that we have to deal with.
Right.
Kind of like, and
Well,
during that time as well, if you looked at NullSec, there was still a fair amount of stuff that was going on. So it hit people when they were busy dealing with other stuff, so they didn't realize they'd have to come back and deal with it. So, I think
it's a
it
very
happened.
complicated time for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those. Like I know Test was in the middle of fighting Frat at them at the
Yeah.
time, and we weren't set up to come back and deal with this type of stuff. So I know probably some of the leadership went and looked and went, well, shit, what do we do? Kind of like,
Right.
what can we do to deal with this? Are we going to have to cancel our war to
Yeah.
come back and deal
Well,
with it
they
because it's going to
did.
be that big?
They did.
Or, yeah, that's what I mean.
Yep.
Where
And
perhaps,
I want to jump on to one last point. You go ahead and finish. Sorry.
I was going to say, where this goes to my communication standpoint, it's CCP not communicating
Right.
what's happening. They just say drifters can now spawn, they can go and hit people. Okay,
Right.
there's no more knowledge to that. And if they want to do it like they did when if you remember, I know back, if you go back to when they first implemented incursions, they spawned and that's it. They told you like nothing else, nothing about what the rats were or how they did or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that community grew itself to go, we can make good money here doing it. Let's find out what we need to do it. There
Right.
was a reward there to incentivize them, kind of like.
Well,
If, however, if you imagine if they just implemented them and went, they are here now, they're gonna fuck everything up. They're gonna be in your belts and insta kill you basically because they're Africanized rats, and you're gonna get nothing from it. Then what's the incentive of the community to deal with it? Kind of like.
right. Yeah. So there's two issues there. One is the reward aspect of it, and the second is the learnable aspect of it. Right. So actually, the Rasnenborg is a really good parallel, in my opinion, because the Rasnenborg, likewise, all you get from them is what they drop. So the Drifters drop some blue loot and I think some Antikythera elements. So some stuff to make some Mitosis Link and some stuff that you can throw into Concord. Likewise, Triglavians only drop red loot and a little bit of salvage, like trig salvage to build T2 trig ships. Cool. So likewise, no payouts, no ISK, no LP, nothing like that. So, but the difference is that the Rasnenborg could be hunted down. You could descan them, and in order to hunt them, there's gameplay there. You couldn't descan the drifters. You never knew where they were coming. It wasn't something, even once you accepted the drifters are coming, there was no point to go from like, oh my God, I know nothing about what's going on towards mastery, right? There was no defenses to be set or
Yeah.
pattern to learn and respect. Likewise, meanwhile, on the Triglavian side, Arataka Research Consortium mapped the invasion patterns of the invasions for the entire year and was able to predict and identify that the Triglavians were coordinating and targeting specific types of stars above other stars, such that we knew what the primary objective of Chapter 3 was prior to CCP ever saying anything about it. And that made, and the thing is that made the news. So the difference is that, like, with no planning, then it there's nothing to learn, there's nothing to bite into. It feels bad for the people engaging with it. But with a little bit of a something to find, it can be transcendent to the point of history making. And it's important for CCP to take the responsibility to do that little bit, because we can't do that. That is something that only CCP can do. Only CCP can put that game design in, and we've seen it do it before, but that's what makes these things more impactful, because when the drifter comes in and kicks the nullsec guy in the face, that nullsec guy wants to be able to kick back, and when he can't, that's when we start to have real big problems.
Yeah, because that's when people get frustrated. Because if you can't do anything about it, what can you do?
Right.
That's the point. Like, if you take it around about the same time they did that, they also removed, if you remember, local from nullsec. And they went around and said, I think the official Concord statement was something like, we don't, with the pressure from Triglavians, we can't afford to fuel the local thing that does it in nullsec and nullsec, I think it was.
Helium,
because it still had it in lowsec.
quantum entangled helium 5 or helium,
Yes.
yeah, helium 4.
So what would be a solution? Add something for the nullsec blocks that they need as well. Whether
Right.
you add it to stuff like iHub upgrades or an entirely new structure itself, like a Sino jammer or something that you have to fuel instead, and then the blocks themselves can choose where they need it. The most important. They might not be able to fuel everywhere, but you're not removing that aspect entirely, because at that point, nullsec becomes wormholes but with gates.
Right. Well, so
And without the reward of a wormhole, where a wormhole has high paying sites kind of like that you can do. Where in nullsec it was still the same risk, but you just removed local entirely. And we saw a drop in player base from that.
right.
Where they just went, here's another issue you have to deal with on top, and there's still nothing you can do about it. Like, I enjoyed the lore side about it, but it said the Triglavians and stuff like that. But instead, they could have said Concord are now releasing a blueprint to localize the local, kind of like
Right.
make it a structure. In which case would also initiate fights, because people might go in and go, we don't want you next door to have local so you can see us coming in. So we're going to come in, RF that structure, and kill it. So it gives us an advantage over you. Cool. It's more opportunity for PvP inside of nullsec. It adds something else to the game, where there's something you can. They give in an issue or something you need to deal, or a problem, and they give you a solution or a way you can look around at fighting it or solving it. Where instead they just removed an aspect in total, and when deal with it.
Right.
Oh, by the way, we're also changing these ships as well, so they can't be seen on D-scan.
That was a
What's
while.
that
Yeah.
do? Yeah, it initiates panic in certain player bases,
Absolutely.
where you need to look at how you're communicating to your player base and what you're doing. And like, I can't remember if the CSM said that. I think they said that they didn't communicate or say anything
No,
that they were
it was
going to
very
do
little warning.
this. It
Absolutely.
was
Chaos was
bam, like this.
yeah, chaos was the point.
Yeah,
But
which
we are your 10-minute window. But I would love to dig into this a little bit deeper if you want to.
yeah, no, but like I was saying, it's like, all right, but your CCP when you're a CSM, you sign a disclosure, right? So
Mhm.
you can't take advantage of it, and you say not to tell whatever CCP talks to you about, which is sensible, right?
Mhm.
Use that to your advantage. Tell them that you want to do this, and I can almost guarantee that at least the Noblox would have gone, right, okay, you're dead set on doing this. Right, let us help you not fuck it up like they did.
But part of the
There's no
problem is that,
reason that a CSM member would want CCP to flop on something they want to implement. Kind of like.
so part of the problem is that that was something that we've talked about for years, right? And it's a simple solution. It was like a sledgehammer solution that had risen up time and time again, been talked down time and time again. Everybody talked about the consequences of it, and that entire era, and Blackout in particular, was a matter of putting to the test these things that we've been too scared to deal with and just see what the hell it does. Blackout isn't the only good example of this. One of the examples that most people don't really think about, which does have an impact and some people think was a problem, but wasn't nearly as much of a problem as people thought it was going to be, was shield slaves, or what would eventually be known as Nirvana implants. For years, that didn't get implemented into the game because we were afraid it would overpower or make things unbalanced. And then lo and behold, one day they were just like, screw it, we're going to throw it in and see if it causes anything terrible. And it didn't cause anything terrible. And likewise, for years we argued back and forth about what would happen with Blackout and all this stuff. And I would always argue that it was wormholers saying to nullsecers that they should be more like wormhole space. But lo and behold, it was time to try it out. It was time to see what it was be like. And they even said from the very beginning it was an experiment, not an implementation of a new feature. So I don't know if I necessarily agree that it was a failure, although I understand that a lot of nullsecers do feel that way. But I do want to explore this idea of a player-built local because unfortunately they use this term for the newest feature that they just released with the mobile observatories. But what has frustrated me with the local problem from the very beginning is that local is not an intelligence tool. It is a communications tool that we have used for intelligence because it provides a piece of information that is useful to us.
But nullsec uses it as an intelligence tool.
Right.
There's no escape from that.
Exactly.
But CCP refused to accept that it is used at that, and they don't give us a different way to find intelligence. Kind of like.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm getting to. So the issue that I have is the fact that the issue with the game design is that we don't have a real intelligence tool. Not that local is a certain way. This is why it bothers me with things like local being disrupted. The chat client being disrupted should not be an intelligence collapse of the game, right? Like that seems bizarre that it would be that big of a problem for the chat client within the game to be disrupted, especially given how much we use out of game chat, and to be frank, how bad the in-game chat client is. Like, that just tells me that there's something fundamentally wrong. And the issue is that we don't have a real designed intelligence system. So what I've called for is the ability to put observatories on key structures like stargates, stations, etc., and that it will log events, and you will be able to, like a security officer for an organization, be able to open up a UI to view the different observatories to monitor for potential threats. So that way you actually have to build your web of intel, but it has a tool that encourages you and rewards you for doing so. And what pisses me off about this local, no local argument is that we are lacking legitimate intel gameplay, security gameplay, because of all of this, because of the fact that we're trying to make a bad solution do something it was never intended to do.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to go down that route of like doing those structures, you also need to bear like what information it's going to give you, right? And so you might also have to look at different tiers of them. Like I agree that we shouldn't have to use local as an intelligence tool. There's no point of like local become the intelligence tool it is. I mean, we use DScan as an intelligence tool, which it's meant to be.
Right.
But we don't have any other options. Like, if you look at it, that's all we have is DScan as an official intelligence tool.
Right. But even look at that. We have complexity. You have range. You have certain ships that can be hidden from it. You have all these different pieces. Certain things can be warped to out of it versus not warped to it. You can tell it is a designed piece of equipment, whereas local is a chat client and therefore has a list of people. That's it.
Yes. And the other issue with that as well is even though it's a bannable offense, I know many people hide themselves on purpose by doing tricky ISP stuff. You take out
Oh,
Snuff
yes.
Out will never admit to it, but I've seen one of my friends be caught by someone who was hiding themselves in local. So they enter in, they've descanned, they couldn't see anybody because it's cloaked, which we
Mm-hmm.
now have an issue to deal with people who are cloaky camping, which I'm more than happy with. It's a good use of a new structure or a
It's a
new way
well
to
designed
implement
feature,
it.
to be
Yeah,
honest.
it's a well-designed feature. You have a 15 minutes where you can't be decloaked by it, and
Yeah.
then if someone wants to put down that structure, it will decloak you, like with a percentage chance. It's not a guaranteed chance, but it's a percentage chance, and
Mm-hmm.
you can put multiple of them down to increase your chance. It's a good idea, but like when we have to use unintended stuff as intelligence tools, it causes more issues, like people hiding themselves from it
Yeah.
by doing tricky ISP stuff, and then you're moving around in a place that you think is safe because you've used your only official intelligence tool at a time, and you can't see anybody in system with local of you, and you've descanned in case, and then you move something in, and then suddenly this person who's not in local that you've had to use an intelligence tool uncloaks on you. You go, well,
Wait a
what
minute.
what the
Yeah.
hell? Yeah, like, there's no one here. And I know like people to petition it CCP because they lost something shiny or they lost something not shiny or whatever, because they go, no one was in system with me, and CCP responds with, did you use local as an intelligence tool? It's not meant to be used that way. Therefore, it's not a valid ticket or whatever. At which point you
Yeah.
go, where is my valid intelligence tool? You have DScan, that's never going to reach an entire system. It's good.
And that
If you implement a intelligence tool, it doesn't need to reach the entire system, but you need to be able to do things in certain places to log or catch people in certain areas.
right.
If you want, like, could be as simple as this person is nearby you somewhere. You anchor a structure, and it might say, so and so, you have so and so people nearby you, and then you go, right, okay.
And
Or like you're saying, if you anchor a structure on specific stargates that tell you certain information, certain ones will tell you if there's anybody there.
right.
Certain ones might tell you ship types, but not if there is someone there. Like it
Yeah.
might tell you a ship-wide ship type kind of like thing.
Yeah, and I was thinking that certain ship
Or
types could be like
yeah,
like not be seen, and then you could hack it to shut it down and like blind the person, and then
yeah.
get your groups through.
Like
Yeah, there's all
we
kinds of
have to
really cool
hack.
gameplay.
I was gonna say, like we have to hack up well structures, find out what timers they might come at.
Hmm.
All right, maybe you have to come in system, hack these observatories, and it might hide you for 5 minutes.
Right,
Cool. You know what I mean? It
and
might delay the logs for so long, and that would be a cool feature. You've put in something, and you then in that case, if you want to be careful about it, you have to watch these structures to make sure nobody's trying to purposely hide themselves. So
right.
it's it adds complexity to an intel structure that needs complexity,
Yeah,
because at the moment we have a simple yes, no, someone's in here. Perhaps maybe keep those structures out of wormholes, because wormholes are the way they have been, right?
I
They
want
might need soft to be anchored,
I
but
want to be able to
necessarily
deploy
they don't have to
spoofs.
be able to put it. Yeah,
I want to be able
they
to
might
deploy
also be
spoofs.
able to put,
Sorry.
yeah, or yeah, you know what I mean, or give them a hacking option, say to increase the amount of people that it thinks is there. Maybe it doesn't hide you, but maybe it tells them that there's an extra 10 people in with you. And then you might go, oh, this then goes to PvP, where you're looking at this and you go, well, shit, they might have 5 more people than me. Do I want to engage them? Do I fight them? Are they actually 5 people? You don't know until you've seen the fleet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one of those, it adds extra complexity. Not only does it help the people who are doing their day-to-day ratting or whatever, like we were talking earlier, but it adds complexity to not only that, but PvP as a general in these player-owned areas where we need to be encouraging battles are not discouraging, because if we go and talk about, if let's say I quickly mention the resource reduction, all that did is reduce the amount of ISK that these or ore that these empires could get, and locks. You go, right, okay, we can't afford to fight these battles, so we just let them have it. What's the point in that? You're reducing the fights that even CCP have said in the past that they want to encourage player fights. I mean, it starts stuff like WST and these 1DQ battles and stuff like that over these stuff. But if you remove the way people get the ore or stuff like that, it reduces people who are going to come and do it, or the willingness of people to do it.
That's true. I believe that we went through a temporary phase, and we go through cycles, and I think that we're going to be coming out of that soon, and we are starting to come out of that. So I hope that like a little bit of that concern will be alleviated as time goes on. But I also think that it's going to be an interesting time to be paying attention, and we need people who are passionate about this stuff, that is paying attention, engaged with CCP, helping making these things happen, especially on the CSM. I think that you have a lot of really good ideas, and I had a good time chatting with you about them all. I know that you said yourself that you're not sure whether or not you're going to be elected in this year, but I think that there is very good reason for people who are interested in nullsec to look at you as a valid nullsec candidate, and give you the reinforcement, the votes that you need. And who knows, you could very well come in this year, and if not, I hope that this is only the beginning of a
Oh,
long
yeah,
and
no,
storied career.
I've just started my interest in stuff like this as I've gotten more involved with different communities. Like I say, I've gotten involved with Russians who do lowsec, and I've gotten more involved with my nullsec group as it is, and only as my area of like of people that I've met have I decided that sometimes we need the not necessarily what the old people want you. I am more new to the CSM. I am more new than some of the people who are running. I mean, if you look at Villy and ProGod, they've been playing Eve like non-stop for like the past 10 years or whatnot. And I know as well, this war that's going on currently is going to be the end of some people who are been in these nullsec alliances. I mean, we know that there's a certain amount of people that are in, let's say, high positions that have said after this war they're retiring, and that's all good if that's how they want. But at the moment, their opinions are, I want to keep things as they were
Yeah.
5 years ago,
Eh,
and which
yeah.
isn't necessarily healthy for the game. And you want to be able to get new players in as those people leave, and only increasing lore and adding a bit of complexity will keep certain players who want to stay more involved and more interested, and add the other stuff as well.
Yeah, and you
Like
certainly
you've
do
got your
seem to represent that kind of more modern uh, viewpoint. Because, like I said, the old guard may look at this and be like, "Man, I don't want to have to deal with harder PVE." You're like, "No, man, the universe is spooky. Let's embrace that." Which is funny because it's almost an older view of Eve Online, but I feel like you're right. There's a certain amount of the old guard that has gotten soft and comfy, and that's one of the problems with a game that's 18 years old. Like, we can say good things about the people that have been playing this game for 18 years, but at a certain point, they're just kind of this big weight that's weighing on the entire system, with too much wealth and too much power and too much history to have a place within the ecosystem that's fair. And so, yeah, it may be time for some of those people to give way to newer blood. And I do believe that that's a lot of what we've been seeing over the last year. And I think
Yeah,
that
I
you might
mean,
be an important part of that.
CCP have realized this. I mean, you go back to
Oh, absolutely.
2013 and you look at the tutorial for the new people. They started looking at their retention rate over the last couple of years, because they realized that the tutorial is basically, here's a ship, goodbye.
Yep.
And now it's like, here's a ship, here's how you use it and what you can do with it. There are other ships you can look
Bye.
at.
No.
Now
Yeah.
go
Now
into
bye.
the universe and experience what you can experience. Because like they said back in like 2013, only something like 30% of the people that tried the game stayed.
Yeah.
Because it was like you had to come in with friends that maybe knew a bit more or all together, and you had to work it out. Where if you came by yourself, which I'm glad I didn't at the time, it is like shit. Well, what do I do? Uh,
Yeah.
um, you play it for an hour and go, right, okay, I'm not really interested anymore. I'm gonna go play Doom or another MMO or something else. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
it doesn't seem worth your time. This game is a complex game, and it should only get more complex in the future. However, we also need to look at keeping those new players in content as well. I mean,
Right.
testers realize this. We've just started to get our brand new bro corp, as in anybody come in, and we're walking people through what they can do, how they can do babysitting. I mean, I go around and I help mentor them as well. I mean, I go to multiple ones and I go, right, you're struggling for this. Here's a donation. Do with it as you wish. Or there was another one I met in a new bro system, like brand new, and he was like, I just lost in a Tristan. I don't know what to do. And I went, all right, okay. Here's 50 million esque. Here's 100 Tristans. Go and play around with the fit and go do what you want. Because that's what we do. Is people who have been in the old generation should be helping, encouraging, as well as CCP.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And you are definitely somebody who can fill your time, and I can appreciate that too. So yeah, and I mean the good news is that I mean good news for you is that some of these guys, in particular the two that you mentioned, this is their last probably their last run, uh, because if they win, they have the term limits start to hit in. So at the very least, the are you hoping to be seen as like the rightful heir of the test vote? Is that one of the goals? Is
I
this
mean,
is this CSM
I would.
17 starting early, or what's going on here? Is that
I
pretty
mean,
much it?
I would love to be seen that way. I mean, I'd love to start CSM 16, but like the likelihood is like this is like a stepping stone, kind of like look at it in a long picture. This is probably more of a stepping stone to maybe next year's or something like that. When there's like I'll probably also only be higher up, and possibly I might even get put on my own on the ballot for test.
Right.
But at the moment, I know I probably won't be. And all I've got to do is get myself out there, make sure people know how I'm looking at the game and what I want to do for the game in general. And whether your opinions lie with me or not is the point of whether you want me to go in or not. Like I say, you vote for the person who you align with the most and try not to vote with who else tells you to or who your friends are voting with.
Right.
Kind of like.
And to that end, it's really important because uh, you're you you're almost running now because I'm sure your leadership and everybody will be watching your performance and seeing it towards your viability, and this does build up to the next option, and this is a very long game, and so I don't fault you at all with the forethought of behaving this way, but to that end, what that means is that people who do believe in you, if you've been listening and thinking like Hurley has got it. I want to vote pro, that Dino or whatever you want to call it, or I just believe in what he has to say. It's important to put him up there and put him high up there. Who knows? Maybe even if you're not being told or paid by one of the block boat guys to put them at the top, put Hurley at the top, so that way his name comes across and it sends a clear signal because uh, he's he's obviously going to be here hopefully for the long haul. So it's been a very good time talking to you, my friend. Uh,
And it's been great talking with you too.
I'm sure it won't be the last time.
Oh no, it won't be. It won't be.
All right.
However, now it looks like it's probably the best time to go to bed as the use.
Yeah,
Oh, it's 2 a.m. here.
I kept you later than you were even going to, so I appreciate you coming on. And I guess I'll just give you your 07 then. Have a good one, 07.
It's all right. Good night, my friend. I
Good
wish
night.
you luck.